Hey everybody, welcome to Ready for Brazil. Mike here once again. We're going to talk about something very interesting today. We're going to talk about the different levels of football, soccer in Brazil, right? So we're not going to talk about teams specifically. We're not going to talk about players, rivalries. We're going to talk about the actual leagues and how they each connect to each other through relegation, promotion, and all those other things, state tournaments, national cup tournaments, those kind of things, right? So, of course, you have the first league, the highest on the table, right? The highest on the system in the pyramid, right? So you have the Brasileirão, of course, right? So that is 20 teams. It's completely full of all the famous teams, Santos, Palmeiras, Corinthians, all those teams, right? So what happens is that there are 20 teams, they play 38 games, they play each other team twice, right? One home and one away, total for 38 games, right? At the end of the season, whoever has the highest point total based on wins, draws, and losses, they are, of course, the champion, right? Now, the top four of the Brasileirão, right, of the first league, Serie A, right, they make it to the Copa Libertadores, which is a very, very prestigious international competition of all the best clubs in South America, right? So the top four advance, right? The top four get entry and they get classified into the Copa Libertadores, which is extremely popular and is something that every team wants to do. So, getting back to Brazilian national football, so the first league is Serie A, right? Second league is Serie B, right? So, of course, that is 20 teams as well. Same format, you play all the other teams, one home, one away, right? Just like in Serie A, the worst teams, the four worst teams of Serie A go down to Serie B. The best four in Serie B go up to Serie A, right? And, of course, the worst four in Serie B get bumped down to Serie C, right? Serie C is a little bit different, right? So they have 20 total teams, but they're split into they're split into two groups of 10, and then those teams in each group play each other. After that, you have a playoff, right? So what happens is that you'll have a playoff, right? And even if your point total, right, is higher than another team, for example, but you don't make it to the semifinals, you don't advance, right? So it is based completely on playoffs, right? So if you have two groups of 10, right, of course at the end, the best teams from each group will play each other in the playoff. At the end of the playoff, right, you'll have semifinalists and you'll have a champion, of course, right? The four semifinalists are the ones who go up to Serie B. The way they do relegation is slightly different. You have, at the end of all the playoffs, you put the teams in order based on points from the group play, right? Based on group play. The four worst point totals from group play get down to Serie D, right? The fourth league, right? So it's strange because promotion is based completely on, promotion Serie C is based completely on semifinals, right? Semifinals advance, right? However, relegation is not. It's depending on order of point total after everything is said and done, right? Which is not dependent on the playoffs at all. So Serie D is, of course, the most confusing. It is the lowest level of national football, right? League football in Brazil. So you have 8 different groups, right? And they battle it out. So after they play this certain amount of games against the group, I believe there are 5 or 6 teams in each group. Either way, it's not very important because the winner of each group and the second place team in each group, they go to the playoffs, right? So there's 16 total teams, right? 2 teams, right, from 8 different groups. So the way the way they seed the playoffs, right, is that the best team of all the groups, highest point total, all the groups, will play the second place team with the lowest point total, right? So, first seed versus 16, second seed versus 15, right? So, all that's said and done, right, get to the playoffs. Once again, the semifinals are the ones who advance to Serie C, right? However, the way they do relegation in Serie D is, well, relegation is not really existent because it is dependent on something else. Classification Serie D relegation Serie D is dependent completely upon your state tournaments that take place in the other part of the year, right? So the Brasileirão runs from, I want to say, October, November through May, right? So fall to the start of spring, more or less, right? In the other part of the year, in the northern hemisphere summer months, in Brazil it's of course the winter months, they have the state tournaments, right? The state tournaments. Now, of course, each state has a tournament. That's great and all. Now, depending on the classification of your state, right, the strength of your state football, each state has a certain amount of spots it has guaranteed to go into Serie D, right? So let's go back for a second. Serie D, the semifinalists go up, right? So 4 out of the 40 teams. There's 40 teams, right? So that would be 5 teams a group then, right? So it'll be 8 groups of 5, 40 teams total. So what ends up happening is that a team that does poorly, not even does poorly, a team that just doesn't continue to move up through the playoff system, right, in Serie D, that team has no guarantee of being in that league again because the following year, because there's no relegation system. It is based completely on the state classifications and how you do in the state tournaments. Let's take a look at that right now. So if you see here, we have Red Bull Brazil as an example in the middle. They're from Campinas in the state of São Paulo. It says here in Portuguese that they were the best placed team of the state championship São Paulo. So that's why they're qualifying right here for the Serie D. So they qualified through the state championship. So let's take a look at how the state championship played out. All these teams here, Santos all the way down to Ponte Preta, they are teams that are already in the Serie A or Serie D already. So they don't need to qualify for the Serie D. So Red Bull Brazil is 6th place. They're the best team that's not already qualified for a national competition, Serie A or Serie B or Serie C, to do in this tournament. So then they get classified for Serie D because all the other teams have already classified. Okay, so we're back. So we just took a look at Red Bull Brazil, right? So they classified from the São Paulo state tournament, right? State championship. Even though they didn't win it, all the other teams in front of them had already classified for other national leagues. I believe mostly the Serie A and maybe 1 or 2 in the Serie B. So Santos, Palmeiras, all the other teams ahead of them, for example, right, already in it, right? So they're not going to Serie D, right? So because the state of São Paulo has allotted a certain amount of spots, I believe it's 2 for Serie D, take into consideration the state tournament, the teams that are not already classified in the other national leagues go to Serie D, right? So in that example, Red Bull Brazil, right? Right. It is kind of strange, right? So there's promotion relegation. When you get to Serie D, it really depends on the state tournaments. And that's what's really strange, really difficult to wrap your head around because, it stops being a national thing and it goes into the state. And it just, you can have crazy results. You can have, you could technically have a team that finishes like 8th or 9th in the state championship, but if all the other teams in front of them are already in Serie C, Serie B, Serie A, they make in the Serie D. So I'm still waiting for my local teams to make it in. So they're close. They're in the first São Paulo League, São Paulo State Championship A, right? So if they do well, maybe they'll make it to the Serie D, right? That's a long shot. That team is Ferroviária, by the way. So anyway, so let's talk about some international competitions, right? So you have or I wouldn't say international, I would just say, let's say cup competitions to start with, right? So besides the league football we just detailed, the national and the state league football, you have the cup football, right? Copa do Brasil, right? Very famous, very prestigious. And that is, you can say like the FA Cup in England, it is just pretty much every team has a shot, right? More or less. And you just battle it out for a long, long time and eventually have a winner, right? Cup football. Okay? So we have National League, we have state leagues, you have the Brazilian Cup, Copa do Brasil. You also have state cups too, right? And normally the state cups, the way they work is that a lot of times they won't involve the best teams of that state because those teams are already playing in the National League, right? So they sort of, well, who's the best of the teams that aren't classified yet, right? So there's a bunch of different competitions, right? So let's move on to Libertadores, right? Libertadores, like I mentioned before, extremely prestigious competition. You know, Brazilian teams versus teams in Argentina versus teams in Chile, Uruguay. It is fantastic football to watch, very open football. I mean, I'm sure you've seen things on the internet. I mean, the fans are just going wild, you know, throwing flares under the pitch and everything, right? So a lot of cool things going on there. So I just wanted to shed some light on the Brazilian footballing pyramid, right? It is kind of confusing. Hopefully you learn something, hopefully you enjoy it a little bit. It's always good to talk about football, right? So just remember Brasileirão, A, B, C, D. Then you have the state championships, right? Which can help you classify for Serie D, right? Besides that, you have Copa do Brasil. Besides that, Libertadores. There's also Copa Sul-Americana, which is sort of like the Libertadores, which is like Europa League, right? It's Libertadores, but not as popular, right? So I didn't really feel like talking about that because a lot of people don't care. So have a good one, folks. Hope you learned a little about Brazilian football, Brazilian culture, right? Take care.